welcome to this edition of the Mashreq Sustainability Dialogues, a podcast series that facilitates knowledge exchange critical voices leading the region's drive towards net zero. Focus on the role of sustainable finance. We like to understand how different stakeholders in the region and beyond are moving towards a more sustainable economy. So today I am thrilled that we're going to take a deeper dive into the world of circular economy and how to navigate the path towards that into a more sustainable economy in the region and beyond. And I'm thrilled to be joined by a wonderful group of speakers. Ms. Yasmin Berber, Head of Sustainability, Middle East and North Africa at Nestle, Ms. Kristen Hughes, Resource Circularity Director at the World Economic Forum, and our host from Mashreq, Thomas Jacob, Senior Vice President, Head of Strategy at Mashreq Bank. So thank you all for joining. And to kick us off with this conversation, I'm going to welcome you, Thomas, to give your opening thoughts on the topic, reviving resources, how to navigate the path to circular economy.
Thank you, Leila. And good afternoon, Yasmin, Kristen, and Leila again. So I think on behalf of Mashreq, it is my great pleasure and privilege to invite you to this session as part of the Mashreq Sustainability Dialogues. As you all know, I think this region continues to be one of the bright spots globally for economic growth. But this growth has also led to dramatic increases in the demand for resources such as energy, food, and water. I think there is an acute need to break this linkage, and this has also been explicitly recognized in the UN's 12th Sustainable Development Goal, the SDG 12, which calls for countries to ensure sustainable consumption and production. It is in this context that the circular economy approach becomes important by decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources. I think a circular economy can provide solutions for these challenges by reducing waste and promoting sustainable consumption patterns. The UAE also, in recognition of this, has established the UAE Circular Economy Council, as you are all aware, which is chaired by the Minister of Climate Change and Environment. And this is expected to play an important contributing part to UAE's Green Agenda 2030. But I'm sure that this is not going to be easy sailing, as there are a host of challenges to be overcome in the circular journey. I believe this discussion with this distinguished panel of experts will help us in navigating this journey better. With that, I hand it back to Leila.
Thank you, Thomas, for those opening comments. And building off on that, I'm going to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Yasmin Berber, Head of Sustainability, Middle East and North Africa at Nestle, to give your opening comments on the topic and kind of give us an idea of what does the circular economy landscape look like in the Middle East right now. And if you can give us a real world example, obviously you work at Nestle, a major corporation in the F&B industry. So your opening thoughts on the topic.
Thank you so much, Leila, and thank you, Thomas, for hosting us. I'm pleased to be today on this panel to engage on a very important topic, which is circular economy. And it's part and parcel of advocating to it in our global net zero journey, because we are aware to safeguard resources for future generations, we need to ensure that whatever we do across our value chain, we are conscious to regenerate resources, to avoid as well waste and loss of natural resources, to safeguard, protect, renew the environment. So when it comes to packaging, for example, we are aware that even if we have bold commitments towards 2025, which is not far from now, addressing recyclability of our portfolio at large and cutting virgin plastic. However, without ensuring that there are systems for recycling in place, there's the right awareness to, and even harnessing the behaviors of the eco warriors and consumers at large, we will not be able to crack circularity. And even if we have the awareness, and even if we have the right packaging and the infrastructure, you need to lean on other actors in the value chain, like governments, for regulation, for policies, for laws, frameworks. We need to advocate for extended producer responsibility. We need to ensure there are enough manufacturing facilities for recycling, so that we can ensure a closed loop economy in countries and regions. So we all need each other, and honestly, that's how I see it. That material is finite, and to preserve things for the future generations, for decades and hundreds of years ahead, we need to be conscious about the materiality of all natural resources. The system as is cannot serve us for the future. The linear approach and circularity across industry, it's not only, it's beyond packaging, it is the answer for
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin, for those opening comments. And Kristen, I also welcome your opening thoughts and maybe focusing on the importance of the first part of our question, which is what Yasmin was also referring to, reviving resources. And what are the opportunities and challenge in a region like the Middle East? And obviously, from your point of view, I mean, from the World Economic Forum's point of view, you kind of have this global landscape. And what are some lessons that can be learned from different regions that could be of use for a region like the Middle East?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll build a little bit on what Yasmin was saying as well, because
Mhm.
really what we're seeing is that you have industries, you have companies like Nestle, and then you have other broader, bigger industries and governments who have been setting really ambitious targets. Yasmin mentioned the 2025 target, which is in just a couple of years, but there are other targets around the Paris Agreement and really trying to achieve net zero emissions. And one of the most important ways to address the net zero goals and really to achieve this is by adopting circular economy practices. So we can really reduce waste and we can alleviate raw material scarcity in the way that we actually utilize and consume. And so we're really also seeing this even within consumers. Consumers are trying to figure out ways that they can be more sustainable and use less and waste less. And so with this parallel shift to a more sustainable global economy, we're seeing senior executives and businesses pledging to create more resilient, more flexible supply chains and really trying also rapidly to change the consumer expectations. So we know that this is already quite unprecedented, the amount of change that we anticipate, that we're seeing, but also it's quite visionary. And so really in this sort of, let's call it uncertain geopolitical landscape that we see across the globe, a lot of companies are really trying to make that shift. We also know, I mean, some of the statistics are quite staggering, right? We know that 70% of GHG emissions come from material handling and use. So if we actually can think differently and be circular in our approach, even in the design upstream and the reuse, recycling, and reutilization downstream, we can really start to reduce those GHG emissions. And furthermore, we've also seen great other statistics on the opportunity because we know there will be economic benefits as well. And to your point on that global stage, we're talking to a number of different organizations, companies, businesses, industries who are all looking at ways to be more resilient, to lean into the headwinds that are the economic headwinds of today, and to also find ways to have a greener footprint. So the circular economy really allows that marriage of a resilient, leaning in on the economic headwinds whilst also bolstering the bottom line.
Yeah, completely. And you mentioned this idea, and Yasmin also, on the role of awareness and consumer behavior. So I kind of wanted to focus on that point and go to you, Yasmin, first on that. Consumer habits and daily, everyday tasks that we do are extremely consuming in terms of our resources. What in the region is happening in terms of advancing the awareness, advancing the education, and are we doing that enough? And what can we do to kind of take that step forward in the region and beyond.
Thank you. And before really I jump into consumers and the daily life, I want to start
Yeah,
from a perspective and then migrate to how we can, mobilize consumers as well and aid them in this
yeah.
direction. So packaging, waste management, it is an area of major concern for society. And in many surveys, the polls flag out the concern of society about pollution, and packaging is littered, everywhere. So we are working towards a future where as Nestle, where none of our packaging ends up in landfill or little in litter in the environment. And we cannot deflect the problem to society and then anticipate consumers or communities to step up before addressing key gaps and
Mhm.
opportunities. Both the private and public sector, we have to collaborate in order to make it happen. The amount of packaging that is inappropriately created or managed at the end of its life is a serious and persistent environmental problem. And inappropriate as well waste management, which I alluded to at the beginning, can also create hazardous conditions for people, and this is impacting even health, not only of the planet but even of people where the dumping areas are. So reducing the packaging waste and increasing reusability, recyclability, managing recovered materials effectively is critical for society. So success
Mhm.
in a circular economy for packaging materials, it depends on the existence of infrastructure for collection. And I keep putting, like two lines under this because it is a key gap in MENA. Sorting and reusing and recycling, this is key. And here comes how we want to advocate for the right habits at source, so from households onwards, and companies to design product packaging and systems for recycling here as well, where our role along with the industry peers come in. So the global infrastructure gap is significant and it's not in our control. Like all of what we're talking about is in scope 3. So it's not in our control, but we can nudge it, we can do something to move the needle in the right direction. So we're working to model successful collection pilots in collaborative 220 projects globally with communities around the world. And we are joining other stakeholders in calling on governments to accelerate progress on infrastructure and act on the opportunity in upcoming negotiations on a UN treaty on plastics, for example. We're
Mhm.
advocating for better regulation, harmonized infrastructure system at the global and national level. Like here, we're really advocating along with the industry peers with the UAE Circular Economy Council, and we've inaugurated altogether the Circular Packaging Association, which is under the patronage of Dubai Chambers and Ministry of
Yeah.
Climate Change and Industry, etc. So civil society, of course, has a role to play, yet we need to facilitate the path for their effective engagement,
Mhm.
integration by building and raising awareness, galvanizing stories through our brands communication campaigns, and on the packaging to guide them how together we can be a force for good. It is indispensable to foster partnerships with governments and like minded industry peers on public education campaigns to promote recycling, and even how we collaborate with retailers in store and online engagements. And there are other examples like what we've done with other companies with Veolia, where a recap startup and app is fostering this change in recycling habits. It's allowing consumers to recycle for free They have a collection door to door for free. And the recyclables are already, for example, closing the loop where the plastic, it's becoming fiber, it's part of cushions and furniture. And there are many other initiatives on a local level, regional, and global, which we can share later for the inspiration. Thank you.
Definitely. I wanted to follow up on that. In terms I mean, there are so many different aspects that are critical to this conversation, but you mentioned the infrastructure and the gap, particularly in the MENA region, for instance. Do you see that the investment is here, and what do you think are lessons, for example, that you've learned in your position as head of sustainability at Nestle, where you think the investments can be increased, and is it here basically, and what are the next steps?
When it comes to investment, look, not any single government can take charge of this call alone. It is extremely costly. And that's why there is a call, which is a key anchor in circular economy, which is around the voluntary extended producer responsibility, which will eventually be mandated. In the UAE, it might take until 2026 for extended producer responsibility, EPR, to be launched. In KSA, something around the framework might be released in this coming quarter. However, to be effected, it will need few years. In Jordan, there is a law, but still it might need some time to be realized properly. In Egypt, there is a law, but no executionary framework for it. So what does this mean? It means that the responsibility will be bounced back to manufacturers. So we need to be taking responsibility towards the type of material and the weight of material which is put in the environment. And there should be a formation of a PRO, packaging recovery organization, where we will all pitch in, and they will take charge of the waste collection, the streaming, from compactors to recovery to recycling, to ensure a closed loop economy. And this will incentivize all of us to innovate, to have better packaging, to work better. It will surface transparency, ensure there is a level playing field for all the players, but it will need as well time. Not necessarily all companies of all sizes are ready to step in. So yeah. It is a shouldering, PPP.
Yeah, and it's a trickle down effect, and obviously it's an ecosystem that needs to be created, and that's where I wanted to come to you, Kristen, on that. I mean, obviously you're at the World Economic Forum, but you're also the head of the Global Plastic Action Partnership. So I wanted you to kind of tell us a bit more about that partnership and that coalition, and kind of talk about the importance of collaboration in the space of the circular economy. Yasmin just mentioned it. I mean, there needs to be collaboration, regional levels, but international levels. So at all levels, it needs to be a hand-in-hand action. So what are your thoughts on that? And can you tell us a bit more about what you've been doing at the Global Plastic Action Partnership?
Yes, absolutely. And the Global Plastic Action Partnership is an excellent example of that public-private partnership and engagement from the global players in business, as well as public sector and civil society, who are coming together to really try to address the issue of plastic pollution. And what's been so fascinating is you really do need that full, and Yasmin was talking to this, because you really need the players from each sector, because part of this is also the regulatory needs that governments should be implementing, as well as what businesses are trying to do through EPR schemes or PRO setups that Yasmin also referenced. So I see huge opportunities here. And what we're doing in the Global Plastic Action Partnership is we're helping governments at the national level to run analysis and then on the plastic waste flows in the country. And then we're publishing action roadmaps that really help them to decide and make the right decisions in how to address and what steps to take around innovation, behavior change, finance, inclusivity, and of course, policy and regulatory areas. And so the plastics is just a part of it, though. When I think about circular transformation, is such a critical part of our solution in trying to address climate change. Circular operations, business models need to address each element of the threat, and that's what we're also trying to do in the Global Plastic Action Partnership. It's not all about recycling, although it is a massive need to have increased recovery and collection, recycling, sorting, all of that. We also need to really think upstream in the new designs. And so how do we eliminate plastic from certain things? Are there other materials that we can use without having a knee-jerk reaction and a negative life cycle assessment? Sometimes glass might not be the right substitute for plastic, given the weight and the GHG impact. So, really trying to think through that analysis, but also thinking through what are the substitutions that we can think about further upstream and in the design of the materials, so that we're not utilizing so much plastic that it ends up into the landfill even, and then further into the environment. So it's really pulling together all those players across the value chain, and from upstream all the way downstream.
Yeah, and this we've touched upon it quite a bit already, but this idea of policy. So I wanted to go to both of you, maybe to Yasmeen first. I mean, the UAE, like we mentioned, the UAE approved just last year 22 policies aimed at accelerating the country's transition to a circular economy. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at the UAE Climate Tech, and the Minister of Economy was saying that the UAE aims linear economy to circularity with an annual 7% growth domestic product target to double its economy in the coming years. So it's a huge opportunity economically, but the policies are starting to come across in the UAE and the Middle East and across the world. But can you talk a bit more about this importance and where it can lead us to next steps? Yasmeen, if your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And in fact, really, I'm proud, like together with the rest of the founding members of Circular Packaging Association, we were able to influence around 12 out of those policies in the UAE. And we're collaborating as well closely with other national and multinational companies, where we formed the Saudi Packaging Group, working closely with CIRC, with MWAN, as well, to formulate the same. We've inaugurated as well One Tide Industry Coalition in Qatar, part of the last yards of FIFA World Cup, and the Supreme Committee for Legacy and Delivery. So many, touch points where together our voice is inclusive, in a sense it's embedded in the public sector's decision making. And when it comes to multinationals, because of our global footprint, we are able to anticipate from the developed countries what might be relevant, and then curate, help in the curation of the right policies locally. To spark circularity, we need as well the regulation and the policies on recycled food grade plastic. For example, I'm in the food industry, so that's why the food grade plastic is important. So in Egypt, for example, 2 years ago, we were the first company to launch the 100% recycled PET, so the rPET bottle. Now in the UAE, like the water regulation is approval, and the GSO in Saudi for food, we're still waiting. So this will help, to streamline the circulation of recycled plastic to create economic opportunity and even job opportunities. So we're getting there. It will mature step by step. I think eventually, after the regulation is set, we need pilots just to test before the scaling, and to ensure there is capacity building, understanding by the rest of the players who are the SMEs, who will be part of our value chain as well, to be up and running, and to ensure there is the right taxonomy, the right reporting, transparency of figures. We need to be able to measure where we are in order to manage the whole transition to circularity.
Yeah, and you mentioned an important point on pilots, and it made me think of the role of technologies as well. So I wanted to go to you, Kristen. How much is technology a part of the solution for this circular economy? I mean, every other day you hear on pilot projects, but they're unable to sometimes scale up at the level that we needed to advance circular economy and then sustainability as well. Where do you see that going? And do you think there's enough pilot projects being launched in the region and beyond?
Well, I think when it comes to things like innovation, let's say beyond just technology, the innovations that can really help drive the circular economy. And again, it comes back to this space around design, and you can have these really innovative designs that then take things forward. And you're right. I mean, it's a shame. What we want to do is really shift away from pilot projects and actually really try to find ways to scale. And I will say one thing I find really interesting and I appreciate very much is that Thomas mentioned the Circular Economy Council of the UAE. They have been a fundamental partner for us in developing the circular economy agenda and really supporting our broader circular space, because actually I think that the council is trying to help find those innovative solutions that can be scaled. And so we're working very closely with them around to find those innovations. And interestingly, you also had asked Yasmin about the regulatory implications. And what we're doing at the World Economic Forum, we're also pulling together a collective group of companies and organizations to really look at things like resource recovery, material regeneration, building more productive, resilient, closed-loop supply chains, while also bolstering sustainability and driving economic growth. And through this group of different industries and companies, one of the things we're learning is sometimes the businesses are going faster than the regulations. And so they're almost running into various roadblocks that is not, they're trying to be more circular, they're trying to be more sustainable, and yet they're running into these regulatory barriers that actually impede them. And so, so often we think about regulations needing to pull companies along to be greener, to be more climate friendly, to take on circular economy approaches. But so many businesses that we're talking to through the World Economic Forum are also really trying to get out there and to be more circular, but sometimes are hitting some of these headwinds through the policies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that we're going to look towards at COP28. So I wanted to unfortunately, we're going to start running out of time. So I wanted to get your closing comments on that and COP28 and how to alleviate the importance of embedding circularity in industries. So maybe I'll go to you, Kristen, first. I like to finish off these podcasts by asking if you had to set a top 3 wish list, what would it be at COP28? I mean, obviously it's happening in the UAE. Last year it happened in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh. So it's a great opportunity for the region, but it's also the biggest event of climate change. So what will you be looking towards, looking at COP28 this year?
Well, I think there's a number of things we'd love to see. And one is, again, with the UAE having such leadership already in the circular economy space, we would love to see one day dedicated, or even just, it doesn't have to be the full day at COP28, but a day where we can have circular economy events, really start talking and making that linkage between circular economy and climate. So how can we utilize circularity as a means to trying to address climate change? And I think that there's a way to also start educating those who come to COP28, the different ministers who are negotiating and reporting back on their achievements or their progress against the climate goals, and then being able to help them understand maybe more how circularity can actually help them to progress that. And again, when we think about our consumption levels, I mean, really that we're pulling on so many of the natural resources that Earth is actually capable of regenerating. So we really need to think about, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, the number of GHG emissions that come from materials, handling, and use. And this includes food and products. So we've got so much that we can address. And again, when I was at COP27, we saw a lot of starting to emerge and bubble up. So I feel like there's that opportunity to bring that to the forefront. And so from my side, I'd also, given the fundamental role that circularity plays across all the COP priorities, I'd also really hope to see it mainstreamed into a lot of the different conversations that will take place, as well as around the side. So I think it would be really surprising, I'm sure, to many to learn how it can be such an enabler for their climate goal solutions.
Definitely. I mean, the COP of action, that's what we've been hearing in the UAE. And I mean, His Excellency Sultan Al-Jaber keeps on mentioning the COP of action. We want to move from discussions to actual implementation at this year's COP. So as well, Yasmin, your thoughts on that and kind of your top 3 wish list for COP28. I know you guys are probably going to be involved with Nestle. So what would you like to see happening at COP28?
Well, I echo Kristen, because really circularity, it is the essence of life. Yeah, it is nature. It is how the life cycle and of being on this planet started, and it should be integrated across themes. I can't think of food or the nature-based solutions or the soil or energy without having circularity at heart. So it is key conversation, and I don't think there is a path to net zero, and to be able as well, all of us, to feed and ensure a sustainable future for 9 billion by 2050 without sustainability, without circularity at core, and the role of finance. So it's not only the partnerships across the spectrum, across all players, but and have the ambition, but to get the scale, we need to be able as well to finance the journey. So let's step up, let's all collaborate together, be ambitious, and the global stock take will be the aha moment for us to know how big is the gap, and it takes all of that to close it. So ambition, implementation, financing, and let's get going.
I love that. I love that. And unfortunately, I mean, this is the end of our time, but I could go forever to talk about the circular economy. But I'm going to go back to Thomas, and thank you so much for hosting us. But I'll go back to Thomas for your closing comments and to wrap us up on this week's podcast.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Leila. As an anecdote, in the region, we're all used to the old type of PRO, the ones who used to help us with our visas. But I think the new type of PRO that both Yasmin and Kristen referred to is a need of the hour. Okay, so anyway, and just as closing thoughts, I think the circular economy, it does present significant opportunities for the region to embrace sustainability. We can diversify economy and also to improve the environmental footprint. And I guess with the right investments, I think Yasmin referred to financing, infrastructure, and policies in place. I think the region can become a leader in the global transition towards a circular economy. And I would say sincere thanks to all our distinguished speakers for their participation and very valuable insights. And obviously, thank you, Leila, for moderating this discussion too.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And so thank you so much, Kristen Hughes from the Forum and Yasmin Berber from Nestle. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And to our audience, please tune in to next week's podcast.